Welcome to another sneak peek Saturday at the Alameda Free Library. My name is Jenny, and today I'm going to start reading some short stories. I don't think we have done this yet. It's called American Estrangement. This is the author, and you can find it in the news section. As always, I'm going to read you the inside of the flap a little bit, and then we're going to get started. Saïd Sayrafiezadeh has been hailed by Philip Gurevich as a masterful storyteller working from deep in the American grain. His new collection of stories, some of which have appeared in the New Yorker, the Paris Review, and the Best American Short Stories, is set in a contemporary America full of the kind of emotionally bruised characters familiar to readers of Dennis Johnson and George Saunders. These are people contending with internal struggles, a son's fractured relationship with his father, the death of a mother, the loss of a job, drug addiction, even as they are battered by larger, often invisible economic and political forces of American society. The stories are suffused with the question of identity, personal, social, ethnic, and who ultimately belongs in America. Searing, intimate, often slyly funny, and always marked by a deep imaginative sympathy, American Estrangement is a testament to our adult times. It will cement Sayrafiezadeh's reputation as one of the essential 21st century American writers. No pressure here. All right. So the first story is called Audition. I'm going to read you a little bit of it. The first time I smoked crack cocaine was the spring I worked construction for my father on his new subdivision in Moonlight Heights. My original plan had been to go to college specifically for the arts, specifically for acting, where I'd envisioned strolling shoeless around campus with a notepad, jotting down details about the people I observed so that I would later be able to replicate the human condition on screen with nuance and veracity. Instead, I was unmatriculated and 19, working 6 days a week, making $8 an hour, no more or less than what the other general laborers were being paid, and which is what passed, at least for my self-made father, as fairness. Occasionally, I would be cast in a community theater production of Neil Simon or The Mystery of Edwin Drood, popular but uncomplicated fare which we would rehearse for a month before performing in front of an audience of 15. You have to pay your dues, the older actors would tell me, sensing, I suppose, my disappointment and impatience. How long is that going to take? I'd ask them, as if they spoke from high atop the pinnacle of show business. In lieu of an answer, they offered a tautology. It takes as long as it takes, they'd say. It was spring. It was rainy. It was the early 90s, meaning that Seinfeld was all the rage, and so was Michael Jordan, and so was crack cocaine. The latter of which, at this point, I had no first-hand knowledge. As for Jerry Seinfeld and Michael Jordan, I knew them well. Each evening, having spent my day carrying 6-pound drywall across damp pavement and up banisterless staircases in one of the state-of-the-art family residences being pre-wired for the internet, whatever that was. In a cul-de-sac, eventually to be named Placid Village Circle, I would drive to my apartment and watch one or the other, Seinfeld or Jordan, since one or the other always happened to be on. They were famous, they were artists, they were exalted. I watched them and dreamed of my own fame and art and exalt. The more I dreamed, the more vivid the dream seemed to be, until it was no longer some faint dotted situation on an improbable timeline, but rather my destiny. And all I needed to turn this destiny into reality was to make it out of my mid-sized city, not worth specifying, and move to LA. Where, of course, an actor needed to be if he was to have any chance at that thing called success. But from my perspective of 1,000 miles, LA appeared immense, incensed, inscrutable, impenetrable. And every time I thought I had enough resolve to uproot myself and rent a U-Haul, I would quickly retreat into the soft, downy repetitiveness of my hometown, with its low stakes, high livability, and steady paycheck from my father. The general laborers came and went that spring, working for a few weeks and then quitting without notice. $8 apparently not being enough to compensate even the most unskilled. No matter. For every man who quit, there were 5 more waiting in line to take his place, $8 apparently being enough to fill any vacancy. I was responsible for showing the new recruits around to their first day, which took about 20 minutes and got me out of carrying drywall. Here's the porta potty, here's the foreman's office, here's the paper to sign. They wanted to know what the job was like. They wanted to know if there were health benefits. They spoke quietly and conspiratorially, as if what they asked might be perceived as treasonous. They wanted to know if they might have the opportunity to learn some plumbing or carpentry. You have to talk to the boss about that, I tell them, but the answer was no. What they should have been asking me was if there was a union. No one knew that I was the boss's son. About once a week, my dad would show up in his powder blue Mercedes and walk around inspecting the progress, displeased and concerned, finding everything urgent and subpar, showing neither love nor special dispensation toward me, nor did I show any towards him. This seemed to come easily to the two of us. I was just another working man in wet overalls, and he was just another big shot in a 3-piece suit and a safety vest. The roles were played very generic, superficial, and true. Later, he'd tell me, I'm doing this for you, not for me. What this was not entirely clear. One day, all of this will be yours, he said. This was 3 subdivisions and a 10-story office building downtown. This was the powder blue Mercedes. According to my father, he wanted me to learn the meaning of hard work up close and personal so that I would know what life was really like, but also because he wanted me to experience what he had gone through growing up and on the outskirts of town with 6 siblings, odd jobs, and no help from the government. In short, I was living a version of his life, albeit in reverse. From time to time, I would be paired up with a guy named Duncan Diogardi, who was my age but looked 10 years older and who liked to order me around. Put this here, put that here. He enjoyed the power while I enjoyed the cold comfort of knowing that I could burst his bubble by telling him who my dad was. But a good actor never breaks character. Clearly, I was a novice and not very good at hard work, as Duncan and my father had already surmised. I got winded fast. I got apathetic fast. I cut corners when I could. I waited for opportunities to go to the porta potty. I waited for opportunities to smoke cigarettes. The cigarettes got me winded faster. You need to get into shape, Duncan would tell me. Why don't you use your next paycheck to buy yourself a Thigh Master? This was a joke for him. He would walk around in short-sleeved shirts, impervious to the chill, a tattoo of a snake coiling around his bicep and crawling up toward his neck en route to devour his face. A dramatic and striking image of, if ever there was one, doubly so against his pale skin, slick with drizzle. In the meantime, I slouched beneath drywall, imagining LA in the spring, waiting for lunchtime, quite proficient at not being the boss's son, and all the while reassuring myself that one day in the future I would be performing some version of this role with nuance and veracity, out of shape or not. What did you draw from to create the character? The critics would ask me. Why, from real life, I would say. When lunchtime arrived, I'd sit around with the other general laborers, 30 of us on upturned crates in an unfinished living room, with a spring breeze blowing through the glasses windows, eating roast beef sandwiches and talking about money home problems, work problems. My problems were not their problems, but I wish they were. Their problems were immediate, distinct, and resolvable. Mine were long-term, existential, and impossible. When I spoke, I tried to approximate the speech patterns of my co-workers, the softened consonants and the dropped articles, lest I reveal myself as the outsider that I was. No hard K's, X's, or F's. The irony was that my father's specified plan of self-improvement for me dovetailed with my own experience, real life, up close and personal. The other general laborers knew one another from high school or the neighborhood or the previous worksite, which had paid $10 an hour. They hoped that the subdivision wouldn't be finished until fall, maybe even winter. They didn't mind working forever. They were still counting on a chance to learn to trade. But half of them would be gone in 2 weeks. As for me, I'd grown up in Timpani Hills, where none of these men would have had any reason to visit unless they'd come to do some roofing. I'd gone to the best schools and had the cushiest upbringing, including a pool in the backyard and weekend acting classes, where my dad would watch me perform on Parents' Night, misty and proud in the front row, his boorishness temporarily abated, supportive of his son's passion and talent, until he realized that his son was intending to pursue acting as something more than a hobby. Now all that history was inconsequential, pulsed inside the blender of collective toil. No one would have been able to tell me apart from any of the other general laborers I sat with on my lunch break, smoking cigarettes amid exposed crossbeams. Just no one would have been able to tell that I was the boss's son. To the latecomer entering the theater, I was indistinguishable from the whole. Just as no one would have been able to tell that I didn't really want to give Duncan Diogardi a lift to his house after work, but his car had broken down. Yet one more item to be added to the list of immediate problems. What I wanted to say was, why don't you ride home on a Thigh Master? But what I actually said was, sure, jump in. I could hear the sprightliness in my voice, all false. It was Saturday. It was 4 o'clock. The foreman was letting us off early because the drywall hadn't been delivered on time. The new recruits wondered if they would still be paid for a full day. There was an argument that made sense only on paper. Go enjoy the weather, the foreman said, as if he were bestowing the good weather upon us. Indeed, the sun was high and there was no rain. When the breeze blew, it blew with promise. It should have been savoring the first official nice day. I should have been savoring the first official nice day of spring. Instead, I was driving an hour out of my way down Road I-5. The traffic was slow going. We stopped and started. We stopped again. Duncan Diogardi apologized for the traffic. Inside the car, he was surprisingly thoughtful and courteous. He had his seatbelt on, his hands were folded in his lap. Setting is everything, my dear old acting teacher had once told me, and then we had done exercises to illustrate this concept: forest, beach, prison cell. I don't mind traffic, I told Duncan. I was being courteous too. I softened my... I softened my consonants. I dropped my articles through the windshield. Our mid-sized city crawled past at a mid-sized pace. Mid-sized highways with mid-sized cars, mid-sized citizens with their mid-sized lives. We talked about work and then we talked about ourselves. Away from the subdivision, it was clear that we had little in common. He told me that he'd been doing manual labor since he was 15, beginning with cleaning bricks at a demolition site on the north side of the city. I was taking weekend acting classes at 15. A nickel a brick, Duncan told me. You do the math. I wasn't sure what math there was to do. Duncan was the one who should have been taking acting classes, not me, receiving instruction on how to transform his supply of hard-earned material into that thing called art. He'd already lived twice the life that I'd lived, while having none of my advantages. He was what my father had been before my father hit it big, but Duncan Diogardi was most likely never going to hit it big. His trajectory seemed already established. If I wasn't careful, my trajectory would soon be established. The tattoo of the snake heading up to Duncan's face was not an effect, but as apt as a metaphor as any of what the past had been like for him, and what the future held. He needed no effect. I was the one who needed an effect. Don't ever get a tattoo, my acting teacher had told me. A performer must always remain a blank slate. So here I was, playing the role of general laborer with flawless skin and stuck in traffic. This is where I'm going to stop. There's still quite some pages left for this first chapter. Again, this is called American Estrangement, and it has been written by Saïd Sayrafiezadeh. Okay. You can find it in our news section. I hope you enjoyed this reading, and like always, I'm going to see you in 2 weeks. Bye.